The restaurant was supposed to be nice, one of those places with dim lighting and overpriced pasta that Carlos insisted we go to with his friends from work. I'd spent an hour getting ready. Putting on the dress he said made me look acceptable, fixing my hair the way he liked it. God, I was so pathetic back then, wasn't I? Still trying to be the perfect wife. Still believing that if I just tried harder, loved him more, things would get better. We were sitting at a round table, Carlos, me, and 4 of his colleagues. The wine was flowing, everyone was laughing at some story about their boss, and for a moment I let myself relax. Maybe tonight would be different. Maybe we could just be a normal couple having dinner with friends. Then Marcus, one of Carlos's closest work friends, turned to me with this big smile and said, "Riley, you're so lucky to have snagged this guy. Carlos tells us all the time how you two met such a romantic story." I smiled, about to share the story of how we'd met at that bookstore cafe, how he'd asked about the novel I was reading, how we'd talked for 3 hours about literature and life. But before I could open my mouth, Carlos laughed. Not his charming laugh, the one that had made me fall for him 5 years ago. This was different. Sharp. Cruel. Romantic? Carlos took a long sip of his wine. That's one way to put it. More like desperate, if you ask me. The table went quiet. My stomach dropped. "She practically stalked me," he continued, his voice getting louder. "Showed up at every place I mentioned I'd be. Coffee shops, bars, the gym. It was embarrassing, really. She begged me to date her. Literally begged. My hands were shaking under the table. This wasn't true. None of it was true. We'd met once, exchanged numbers, and he'd pursued me relentlessly with flowers and surprise visits to my workplace. "Carlos," I whispered, but he wasn't done. "I mean, look at her." He gestured at me like I was an exhibit. "You think she could get someone like me without begging? I'm only with her because, well, no one else wanted her. Someone had to take pity on her, right?" The silence at the table was deafening. Marcus's smile had frozen on his face. His wife, Sarah, was staring at her plate. The other couple, Tom and Jennifer, exchanged uncomfortable glances. I felt like I was underwater, everything muffled and distant. 5 years. 5 years I'd been with this man. 5 years of little comments, small cruelties that I'd explained away. He's stressed from work. He didn't mean it that way. He loves me. He just has a hard time showing it. But this? In front of people? Telling lies to make me look pathetic while making himself look like some kind of saint? "That's not true," I heard myself say, my voice surprisingly steady. "None of that is true, and you know it." Carlos's eyes flashed. "Oh, come on, Riley. Don't be dramatic. It's just a joke." "A joke?" I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "Telling people I begged you to date me is a joke? Saying no one else wanted me is a joke?" The entire restaurant seemed to be watching now. "Good, let them watch." "Riley, sit down," Carlos hissed. "You're making a scene." "No, Carlos, you made the scene. You've been making scenes our entire marriage. Just usually in private where no one else can see what you really are." My hand moved before my brain could stop it. The full glass of Coke in front of me, I'd stopped drinking alcohol months ago, though Carlos didn't know why, went up and over. The dark liquid cascading over his perfectly styled hair, dripping down his designer shirt, pooling in his lap. The gasp from the nearby tables was audible. Carlos jumped up, his chair falling backward, Coke still dripping from his hair onto his shoes. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he screamed, his face turning that particular shade of purple I'd seen so many times before, but never in public. Never where others could witness it. 5 years, I said, my voice carrying across the now silent restaurant. 5 years of you telling me I'm not good enough, smart enough, pretty enough. 5 years of you rewriting our history to make yourself look better. 5 years of you treating me like I'm lucky to have you when the truth is, Carlos, I'm the best thing that ever happened to you and you're too insecure to admit it. Sarah stood up then, fumbling with her purse. "I think we should go," she said quietly to Marcus, but her eyes met mine for a moment, and I saw something there. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. "You're crazy," Carlos spat, grabbing napkins from the table, futilely trying to dry his shirt. "You're actually insane. This is assault." "Call the police then," I said, pulling my phone from my purse. "Please. I'd love to explain to them why I did it. I'd love to tell them about all the times you've grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises. About the time you threw my laptop against the wall because I smiled at the barista. About how you monitor my phone and accuse me of cheating every time I talk to anyone who isn't you." "Riley," Tom interrupted softly, "maybe we should all just calm down." "No," I cut him off. "I'm done being calm. I'm done being quiet. I'm done pretending everything is fine when my husband treats me like garbage and expects me to be grateful for it." I grabbed my purse and looked Carlos dead in the eye. "You can find your own way home. And when you get there, your stuff will be in the hallway. Don't bother trying to come in, I'm changing the locks tonight." As I walked toward the exit, I heard him behind me. "You can't do this, it's my apartment." I turned around one last time. "Actually, Carlos, it's my apartment. My name is on the lease. You just moved in and never left. But that ends tonight." The manager was approaching, looking concerned, but I held up my hand. "I'm leaving. Send the cleaning bill to Carlos Mitchell. He knows the address." The cool night air hit my face as I pushed through the door, and for the first time in years, I could breathe. Actually breathe. My phone was already buzzing, Carlos calling, texting, the words appearing on my screen. You're going to regret this. You're nothing without me. No one will believe you. I blocked his number and called a locksmith. They could be there in an hour, they said. Perfect. By the time I got home, I was running on pure adrenaline. The locksmith arrived right on schedule, a woman named Janet who took one look at my face and didn't ask questions, just got to work. While she changed the locks, I methodically went through the apartment, gathering Carlos's things. His expensive suits, his collection of watches, his precious golf clubs. I wasn't vindictive about it. I folded everything neatly, placed items carefully in boxes. I even wrapped his electronics in bubble wrap. The funny thing about Carlos was that for all his need to control me, he'd never actually contributed much to our home. The furniture was mine, bought before we met or gifts from my parents. The art on the walls, the kitchen appliances, the books all mine. When I finished packing, there were only 6 boxes and 2 suitcases in the hallway. 5 years, and he could fit his entire life into 6 boxes. Janet finished with the locks and handed me the new keys. You okay, honey? She asked. And something about the genuine concern in her voice almost broke me. I will be, I told her, and for the first time, I actually believed it. Carlos showed up at 1 a.m. I watched through the peephole as he fumbled with his key, getting increasingly frustrated when it wouldn't work. He was still wearing the Coke-stained shirt, though it had dried to a sticky, dark mess. He started buzzing the intercom. I didn't answer. Then came the pounding on the door. Riley, open this door right now. This is illegal. You can't lock me out of my own home. I stayed silent, sitting on my couch, drinking tea, feeling strangely calm. I know you're in there. I can see the light under the door. Riley, Mrs. Chen from next door opened her door. Carlos, it's 1 a.m. People are trying to sleep. Mind your own business, he snapped at her. Actually, Mrs. Chen said, when you're screaming in the hallway, it becomes my business. Riley, honey, should I call the police? I'm the one who should be calling the police, Carlos shouted. She assaulted me. She locked me out. Your things are all there, I finally said through the door. Take them and go. We need to talk about this. No, we don't. We're done talking. Your stuff is in the hallway. Take it or leave it, but you're not coming in. He tried everything, pleading, threatening, bargaining. He even tried crying, though I'd learned years ago that his tears were just another manipulation tactic. Finally, around 3 a.m., he gave up. I heard him dragging boxes down the hallway, multiple trips to his car. He left 2 boxes and 1 suitcase, probably couldn't fit them in his BMW. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the door, half expecting him to somehow break in, but he didn't. For the first time in 5 years, I went to bed without him beside me, and it felt like freedom. The next morning, my phone was flooded with messages, but not from Carlos. I'd blocked him everywhere. These were from mutual friends, his family, even some of my own relatives. The story Carlos was spreading was already taking shape. I'd had a mental breakdown, attacked him unprovoked in public, and thrown him out of his own home. He was painting himself as the victim of a crazy wife who'd gone off the deep end. My mother called while I was having my morning coffee. Riley, what happened? Carlos called your father. Says you assaulted him at dinner? Mom, I poured a drink on him after he humiliated me in front of his friends. Well, that seems a bit extreme, don't you think? You know how men are? They say stupid things sometimes. Your father once told his poker buddies I couldn't cook to save my life. Mom, he told everyone I begged him to date me, that no one else wanted me, that he was with me out of pity. There was a pause. He said that? In public? In front of 4 other people. Yes. Come home, she said immediately. Pack a bag and come home for a few days. Let things cool down. I should have known Carlos wouldn't let things cool down. I'd been at my parents' house for exactly 1 day when he showed up. Dad was at work, Mom was in the garden, and I was in the kitchen making lunch when I heard the doorbell. Through the window, I could see his BMW in the driveway. Don't answer it, I called to Mom, but she was already at the door. Carlos! Mom's voice was strained. This is unexpected. I need to talk to my wife, he said, pushing past her into the house. He found me in the kitchen, and the moment he saw me, his face transformed. The charming mask he wore for my parents dissolved. You think you can humiliate me and just run away to Mommy and Daddy? His voice was low. Dangerous. Carlos, you need to leave, I said, gripping the counter behind me. We're married, Riley. You don't get to just decide it's over because your feelings got hurt. My feelings got hurt? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You've been emotionally abusing me for years, and now you've done it publicly. Yes, I get to decide it's over. He stepped closer, and I could smell whiskey on his breath. At 2 in the afternoon, you're nothing without me. You were nothing before me, and you'll be nothing after. Who's going to want you now? 33 years old, crazy enough to assault someone in public. That's enough. My father's voice cut through the kitchen like a blade. I hadn't heard him come in. He must have come home early. Dad stepped between us, all 6'2" of him, his construction worker's build making Carlos look small. You're going to leave my house now. This is between me and my wife. Your wife is my daughter and you're in my house, uninvited, threatening her. Leave. Now. Carlos tried to maintain his aggressive stance, but I saw him falter. He wasn't used to someone standing up to him, especially not another man. Riley, we're not done, he said, trying to look around Dad to make eye contact with me. Yes, you are, Dad said, and if you come here again, if you contact her while she's here, I'll file a restraining order myself. I've got a house full of security cameras, Carlos. Everything you just said is recorded. Want to test me? Carlos left, but the damage was already spreading like wildfire through our social circles. His version of events had evolved. Now I was not just crazy, but also violent, unstable, possibly having an affair. He was telling people he'd been trying to help me with my mental health issues for years, that the dinner incident was just the final straw in a long pattern of erratic behavior. The worst part? Some people believed him. Friends I'd known for years suddenly weren't returning my calls. I was uninvited from a book club I'd been part of since before I met Carlos. Even some of my cousins were staying neutral, which really meant they were believing his lies but didn't want to say it directly. But Sarah Marcus's wife from that dinner, she reached out. I need to tell you something, she said when we met for coffee 3 days after I'd moved back to my apartment. This isn't the first time Carlos has done this. Marcus told me that Carlos talks about you all the time at work, and it's never good. He tells stories about how difficult you are, how demanding, how lucky you are that he puts up with you. My stomach churned. How long has this been going on? Years, apparently. Marcus always thought it was weird because whenever we saw you two together, you seemed so careful, like you were walking on eggshells. And that night at dinner, when Carlos said those things, Marcus was shocked he'd finally said it in front of you. Finally said it? Sarah looked uncomfortable. He said worse when you weren't around. Marcus didn't tell me everything. But, Riley, your husband has been destroying your reputation for years. He's been laying the groundwork so that if you ever left him, no one would believe you. I felt sick. All those times I'd wondered why certain friends had pulled away, why I'd stopped getting invited to things, why people sometimes looked at me with this mixture of pity and judgment. It was Carlos. He'd been isolating me, turning people against me, all while playing the devoted husband to my face. There's more, Sarah continued. Jennifer, Tom's wife, she recorded part of what happened at the restaurant on her phone. After you left, Carlos went on this rant about you, calling you names, saying things that were... honestly, they were disgusting. She sent it to me. I think you should have it. She forwarded me the video, and I watched it in my car afterward, my hands shaking. Carlos, covered in coke, his face twisted with rage, saying things about me that I couldn't imagine anyone saying about someone they claim to love. Words I won't repeat here because they still make me feel sick. But the important thing was that Tom, Marcus, and their wives all looked horrified. They weren't agreeing with him. They were visibly uncomfortable. I had evidence. Finally, I had proof that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't making this up. That evening, Carlos showed up at my apartment. He didn't have a key anymore, but he stood outside, buzzing the intercom over and over. Riley, please. I'm sorry. I was drunk. I didn't mean those things. I picked up the intercom. Carlos, I have a video of you after I left the restaurant. You meant every word. Silence. Then, who gave you that? Was it Sarah? That bitch. I hung up and called the police. When they arrived, Carlos was still there, had started kicking the door. They made him leave with a warning. The officer, a woman about my age, gave me a card for a domestic violence helpline. Even if he never hit you, she said quietly, this is still abuse. Document everything. I started documenting everything, but Carlos was escalating faster than I could keep up. He showed up at my workplace, causing such a scene that security had to escort him out. He told my boss I was having a mental health crisis and shouldn't be trusted with important projects. Thankfully, my boss, Linda, had been through a similar situation with her ex-husband and saw right through it. Take a few days off, she told me. Work from home, get a lawyer. And Riley? Save every text, every email, every voicemail. You're going to need them. The lawyers were expensive, but my parents helped. The first attorney I met with, a sharp woman named Patricia, looked through my evidence and shook her head. I've seen this pattern 100 times. He's going to make this divorce as difficult as possible. He's already trying to control the narrative, and he's going to use every trick in the book. But you have something a lot of my clients don't. You have witnesses and video evidence. That's gold. While Patricia started preparing the divorce papers, Carlos was busy turning his smear campaign into an art form. He posted on social media about being a victim of domestic violence, complete with photos of his stained shirt from the coke incident. He started a blog, an actual blog, about surviving abuse from a mentally ill spouse. He never used my name, but anyone who knew us knew exactly who he was talking about. Then came the wedding invitation issue. My cousin Maria was getting married in 3 weeks, and somehow, Carlos had convinced her that we were working things out, that we were coming to the wedding together. Maria called me, confused. Carlos RSVP'd for both of you. He said you're in counseling and doing better? Maria, I'm filing for divorce. We're not together. I haven't spoken to him in 2 weeks except through lawyers. Oh my God, Riley, I'm so sorry. He was so convincing. He said you were going through something but that he was standing by you. That's what he's telling everyone. Maria, I need you to know the truth. And I told her everything. The years of emotional abuse, the public humiliation, the stalking since I'd left him. Maria was quiet for a long moment. Then, he's not coming to my wedding. I'll call him right now and tell him he's uninvited. But Carlos showed up anyway. The wedding was beautiful, right up until the reception. I was sitting at a table with other cousins, actually enjoying myself for the first time in weeks, when I heard his voice. There's my wife. The entire reception hall turned to look as Carlos, clearly drunk, wearing a rumpled suit, made his way toward me. Carlos, you need to leave, I said, standing up. You're not invited. We're married, Riley. Where you go, I go. He grabbed my wrist, and I jerked away. Don't touch me. Stop being dramatic. You're embarrassing yourself in front of your family. The irony of him saying that while he was swaying on his feet, slurring his words, was not lost on anyone. My uncle Roberto, Maria's father, approached. Carlos, you need to go. This is between me and my wife. No, Roberto said firmly. This is my daughter's wedding. And you're not welcome here. Carlos laughed. That mean, bitter laugh I'd heard so many times. You know what Riley did to me? She's violent. Crazy. Ask anyone. I'm the victim here, and you're all enabling her delusions. That's when Maria's new husband, David, had enough. He and 2 of his groomsmen physically escorted Carlos out while he screamed about assault and lawsuits. The whole thing was caught on the wedding photographer's camera and multiple guests' phones. The wedding incident was a turning point. My family, who had been trying to stay out of it, finally saw Carlos for what he was. The video of him being dragged out of the reception, screaming obscenities about me, went viral in our extended social circle. His carefully crafted victim narrative was starting to crack, but Carlos doubled down. He filed a police report about the wedding, claiming assault. He tried to get a restraining order against me, saying I was orchestrating harassment against him. He even called my employer again, this time claiming I was embezzling money, a claim so absurd that Linda actually laughed when HR informed her. He's desperate, Patricia told me. This is what they do when they're losing control. He's throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. Nothing stuck, but it was exhausting. I was spending every free moment gathering evidence, responding to his false claims, protecting myself legally. I wasn't sleeping, wasn't eating properly. I'd lost 15 pounds in a month and not in a healthy way. Then Sarah called with news that changed everything. Riley, you need to know something. Carlos has been fired. What? After the restaurant incident, Marcus told HR about all the things Carlos had been saying about you at work. They investigated and found out he'd been using company resources to stalk you, company email to send harassing messages, company time to write his blog posts about you, even using the company credit card to pay for a private investigator to follow you. A private investigator? He'd hired someone to follow me. There's more, Sarah continued. Jennifer's husband, Tom? He's in the same golf club as Carlos. Carlos has been telling everyone there that you're having an affair. That's why you left him. He's been showing them photos of you taken without your knowledge with any man you've interacted with. Your grocery store clerk, the mailman, your cousin at the wedding. He's been building this whole narrative that you're a cheater. I felt violated in a way I couldn't even articulate. He'd been having me followed, photographed, documented like I was some kind of criminal. That night, I called Patricia. I want to press charges. Stalking, harassment, whatever we can make stick. I was hoping you'd say that. With him being fired for using company resources to harass you, we have a much stronger case. But Riley, I need to warn you this is going to get uglier before it gets better. She was right. When Carlos was served with both divorce papers and a restraining order, he lost it completely. He showed up at my parents' house at midnight, drunk, screaming from the street that I'd ruined his life. Dad called the police, and Carlos was arrested for violating the restraining order and public intoxication. But even from jail, he managed to cause chaos. He called everyone he could think of, telling them I'd set him up, that I'd planned everything from the beginning. He told his mother I was trying to steal his money, which was rich, considering he'd been living off my salary for the last 2 years after he'd quit his previous job to find himself. Carlos's mother, Ellen, called me the day after he was arrested. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Riley, she said, her voice tired. I need to apologize. I wasn't expecting that. I've known for years that my son had problems, she continued. His father was the same way. Charming on the surface, but controlling, cruel. I watched it destroy my marriage, and I promised myself I'd raise Carlos differently. But somewhere along the way, I failed. Ellen. No, let me finish. When you two got married, I saw how he treated you. Little things at first, the way he'd correct you in public, the way he'd dismiss your opinions, the way you started becoming quieter at family gatherings. I should have said something. I should have warned you. I was crying now, silent tears rolling down my face. I'm going to tell the truth, Ellen said. In court, to anyone who asks, Carlos is my son, and I love him, but what he's doing to you is wrong. It was wrong from the beginning, and I'm sorry I didn't protect you. Her testimony would prove invaluable. But first, I had to deal with the immediate fallout of Carlos's arrest. He was released on bail the next day, paid for by his father, who still believed his son could do no wrong. The restraining order meant he couldn't come near me, but that didn't stop him from escalating his online campaign. The blog posts became more unhinged. He was writing these long, rambling entries about being a victim of the system, how women could destroy men's lives with false accusations, how he was going to expose the truth about me. He started a YouTube channel, posting videos where he'd cry about losing everything, claiming I'd manipulated the police, his employer, even his own mother. Some people believed him. Men's rights activists started sharing his content. I started getting hate mail from strangers, calling me horrible names, saying I was everything wrong with modern women. Someone posted my address online, and I had to move in with my parents for safety. But for every person who believed Carlos, more were starting to see through him. The wedding video had been shared widely, and people could see him for what he was, an angry, drunk man screaming at his wife at a family celebration. Former colleagues of his started reaching out to me, sharing their own stories of his inappropriate behavior, his tendency to blame others for his failures, his inability to take responsibility for anything. Then Patricia called with news. The private investigator Carlos hired? He's willing to testify. Apparently, Carlos asked him to do things that made him uncomfortable: plant evidence, break into your apartment, hack your email. The PI refused and stopped working for him, but he kept all the communications. We were building a solid case, but I was exhausted. The constant stress, the public humiliation, the fear it was taking its toll. I started therapy, trying to process not just the divorce but the entire 5 years of marriage that I was finally seeing clearly. He groomed you, my therapist said during one session. Just like predators groom children, emotional abusers groom their victims, slowly breaking down boundaries, normalizing abnormal behavior, isolating you from support systems. What you're experiencing now, this extinction burst of terrible behavior, it's because you broke free from his control. The court date was set for a Tuesday in September, 3 months after the restaurant incident that started everything. Carlos had hired an expensive lawyer with his father's money, and they were planning to fight everything: the divorce, the restraining order, even the validity of our prenup, which clearly stated that assets we brought into the marriage remained separate. But I had something Carlos didn't expect: an army of support. Sarah and Marcus testified about the dinner incident. Jennifer provided the video. Tom described Carlos's behavior at the golf club. The private investigator detailed Carlos's requests to stalk and harass me. My parents testified about him showing up at their house. Even the police officer who'd responded to my apartment that night provided a statement. The most powerful testimony came from Ellen, his own mother. She spoke quietly but firmly about the pattern of behavior she'd observed, about how she'd watched her son become his father despite her best efforts to prevent it. When Carlos's lawyer tried to discredit her, suggesting she was being manipulated by me, Ellen looked him straight in the eye and said, "I've known my son for 35 years. I've known Riley for 5. I know exactly who's doing the manipulating here." Carlos took the stand in his own defense, and it was a disaster. He couldn't keep his story straight. He claimed I was violent but couldn't explain why there were no police reports until after I left him. He said I was mentally unstable but couldn't provide any medical evidence. He insisted the coke incident was assault, but when the judge asked him to describe what led up to it, he actually repeated the lies he'd told about me, begging him to date me. "So you're saying," the judge clarified, "that telling your wife's friends that no one else wanted her and you were with her out of pity is acceptable behavior in a marriage?" "It was a joke," Carlos insisted. "Was your wife laughing?" Carlos's mask slipped. "She's too sensitive. She's always been too sensitive. That's her problem, not mine." The judge's expression said everything. The ruling came 2 weeks later. The divorce was granted. The restraining order was made permanent. Carlos was ordered to pay my legal fees due to his pattern of harassment and frivolous legal actions. The prenup was upheld, meaning he had no claim to my apartment or savings. But Carlos wasn't done. That night, he posted a video that would be his undoing. Drunk and raging, he ranted for 45 minutes about the judge being biased, the system being rigged, and then crucially, he admitted to everything. He admitted to lying about me at work. He admitted to having me followed. He admitted to trying to turn people against me. He said it was all justified because I needed to be controlled and didn't know what was good for her. Someone downloaded the video before he sobered up and deleted it the next morning. It went viral. His employer, a new job he'd somehow gotten despite being fired from the last one, saw it and terminated him immediately. His father finally cut him off financially. Even the men's rights activists who'd been supporting him backed away. It's been 6 months now since that night in the restaurant. 6 months since I poured a Coke over Carlos's head and finally said enough. The divorce is final. The restraining order means I haven't seen him in person since court. I heard through the grapevine that he moved to another state to live with his father, who finally divorced his mother after 50 years of marriage. Ellen is free too, it seems. The apartment feels different now. I've redecorated, painted the walls colors Carlos always said were too cheerful. I bought plants, he hated plants, said they were pointless. I hung up photos of my friends and family, people he'd systematically tried to cut out of my life. The place finally feels like home instead of a prison. I'm in therapy twice a week, unpacking 5 years of gaslighting and emotional abuse. Some days are harder than others. I still catch myself asking for permission to do simple things, like meeting a friend for lunch or buying something for myself. I still flinch when someone raises their voice. I still have nightmares sometimes where he's standing over me, telling me I'm nothing without him. But here's what I've learned. I was never nothing. Even in my darkest moments when I believed his lies about my worth, I was somebody. I was somebody's daughter, somebody's friend, somebody's colleague. I was a person with value completely independent of him. Sarah and I have become close friends. She left Marcus. Turns out Carlos wasn't the only toxic person in that friend group, and we have coffee every Wednesday to remind ourselves that we survived, that we're surviving. My family has rallied around me in ways I never expected. My dad installed a security system in my apartment and checks in every day. My mom has become fiercely protective, shutting down anyone who even hints at victim blaming. Maria sent me a photo from her wedding with Carlos cropped out, and we laugh about how he managed to make even her wedding about him. Work has been my salvation. Linda promoted me to a position Carlos always said I wasn't smart enough for. Turns out, when you're not spending all your energy managing someone else's emotions and ego, you have a lot more to give to your career. I'm good at my job. I'm really good at it. I've started dating again, nothing serious, just coffee dates and dinners where I remember what it's like to be treated with respect. The first time a date asked for my opinion on where to eat and actually meant it, I almost cried. These seem like small things. But when you've been systematically diminished for years, someone genuinely caring about your preference feels revolutionary. Carlos still posts about me online occasionally. He's changed the narrative again. Now he was the victim of a gold digger who planned everything from the start. The fact that I make more money than he ever did doesn't seem to factor into his story. I don't read the posts anymore. Patricia monitors them in case he violates the restraining order, but I've learned that engaging with his reality is like wrestling with smoke. Some people still believe him. Some mutual friends chose his side and haven't spoken to me since. That's okay. I've learned that people who can watch someone be abused and side with the abuser were never really friends anyway. The strange thing is, I'm grateful it happened in public. If Carlos hadn't humiliated me in front of witnesses, if he hadn't been so blatant in his cruelty that night, I might have stayed. I might have continued making excuses, believing that if I just tried harder, loved him more, became smaller, quieter, less myself, he would finally be happy. But he said the quiet parts out loud that night. He showed everyone who he really was. And more importantly, he showed me. I'm not the same person I was 6 months ago. I'm not the woman who sat at that restaurant table, hands shaking, believing she deserved to be humiliated. I'm not the wife who made herself small to avoid confrontation. I'm not the victim Carlos tried to create. I'm Riley. I'm 33 years old. I have a good job, a loving family, true friends, and a future that belongs entirely to me. I survived 5 years of emotional abuse and a vicious divorce that played out in public. I'm in therapy, I'm healing, and I'm learning to trust my own judgment again. Some days I still struggle. Some days the voice in my head sounds like Carlos, telling me I'm too sensitive, too dramatic, too much. But those days are becoming fewer. His voice is getting quieter while mine is getting stronger. The last time Ellen called, she told me Carlos was in therapy too, court-ordered after another incident with another woman. She hopes he'll change. I hope so too, for the sake of whoever comes after me. But that's not my story anymore. His redemption or lack thereof is not my responsibility. My story is this. I was married to a man who tried to destroy me from the inside out. He almost succeeded. But that night in the restaurant, something inside me refused to break. Call it survival instinct, call it courage, call it rage, whatever it was saved me. I poured a Coke over his head, and with that single act of defiance, I poured out 5 years of accumulated poison. It wasn't graceful, it wasn't clean. It was messy and public and absolutely necessary. The other day, I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop. He looked uncomfortable, started to walk away, but then stopped. Riley, he said, I owe you an apology. I knew something was off. All those times Carlos talked about you at work, something felt wrong, but I never said anything. I was complicit in my silence. You were his friend, I said, not unkindly. That's not an excuse. I should have been a better human being first. We didn't become friends, Marcus and I, but that acknowledgement meant something. It was validation that I hadn't imagined it all, that the wrongness I'd felt for years was real. I've started writing about my experience, not a blog like Carlos's, not for revenge or attention, but for processing. My therapist suggested it, and it's helped me see patterns I missed while I was living through them. The way he tested boundaries early on, seeing what he could get away with. The way he isolated me so gradually I didn't notice until I looked around and realized all my close friends were gone. The way he rewrote our history bit by bit until I couldn't trust my own memories. Last week, I got an email from a woman named Amy. She'd found my contact through the court records. She was dating Carlos before he moved away, and she'd found his blog, his videos, the whole narrative he'd created about me. But something didn't sit right with her. So she did some digging and found the court documents, the witness testimonies, the truth. He's doing the same things to me, she wrote. The comments about how I'm lucky to have him, the isolation from friends, the constant criticism disguised as helping me improve. Your story gave me the courage to leave before it got worse. Thank you. I cried when I read that email. Not from sadness, but from a strange mixture of validation and purpose. My mess, my public humiliation, my fight, it helped someone else avoid the same trap. I wrote Amy back. Gave her the number for the domestic violence hotline, told her about the therapy resources that had helped me. We've been emailing back and forth. She's safe now, staying with her sister, filing her own restraining order. Carlos is predictably playing the victim again, but this time, people are seeing the pattern. The couch Carlos used to claim was his, the one he'd actually never paid a cent for, sits in my living room now, reupholstered in a bright turquoise fabric he would have hated. I sit on it every morning with my coffee, looking out the window at a view he used to say was nothing special. But I see the trees changing with the seasons, the people walking their dogs, the life happening outside my window, and it's everything. Recovery isn't linear. Last month, I had a panic attack in a restaurant when I heard someone at another table raising their voice. Last week, I cried in my car after a work meeting because a male colleague disagreed with me. And for a moment, I was waiting for the punishment that never came. Sometimes I still check my phone obsessively, expecting to see his name even though he's blocked everywhere. But there are more good days than bad now. Days when I sing in the shower without worrying someone will tell me I'm off key. Days when I wear what I want without seeking approval. Days when I make plans without asking permission. Days when I exist as a full person instead of a carefully managed version of myself. The legal bills took most of my savings, but I'm building them back up. The therapy costs a fortune, but it's worth every penny. The friends I lost to Carlos's lies are gone. But the ones who stayed, who saw through him, who stood by me, those friendships are stronger than ever. My cousin Maria is pregnant now, and she asked me to be the baby's godmother. "You're the strongest woman I know," she told me. "I want my child to have someone like you in their life." Strength. It's not a word I would have associated with myself 6 months ago. But maybe strength isn't about being unbreakable. Maybe it's about breaking and choosing to rebuild. Maybe it's about pouring a Coke over someone's head in a crowded restaurant and refusing to apologize for standing up for yourself. Ellen sends me a Christmas card this year with a simple message: "Thank you for being the catalyst for my own freedom." She's in therapy too, she tells me, finally processing her own decades of abuse. She's 73 years old and just now learning who she is without someone telling her she's not enough. It's never too late, I guess. It's never too late to leave. It's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to refuse to be small. I keep a photo on my phone from that night at the restaurant. Jennifer sent it to me. She'd taken it just moments before everything exploded. In it, I'm smiling politely while Carlos talks, but if you look closely, you can see it in my eyes. The exhaustion, the resignation. The woman in that photo thought that was as good as life would get. She had no idea that in 5 minutes, she was going to start a revolution in her own life. She had no idea that the Coke in her hand would become her declaration of independence. She had no idea that the worst night of her marriage would become the first night of her freedom. Sometimes I want to reach through that photo and tell her, it's going to be hell. You're going to be humiliated, stalked, harassed, and threatened. You're going to lose friends, money, and sleep. You're going to question everything about yourself and your judgment. You're going to wonder if you're crazy, if you're overreacting, if you should have just kept quiet. But you're also going to discover that you're stronger than you ever imagined. You're going to find out who really loves you. You're going to build a life that's entirely yours. You're going to help other women escape the same trap. You're going to learn that being alone is infinitely better than being with someone who makes you feel worthless. You're going to be free. The divorce papers sit in my filing cabinet, official and final. Sometimes I pull them out just to read the words, "Marriage dissolved." Such clinical language for such a messy ending. But maybe that's appropriate. Maybe some things don't deserve poetic endings. Carlos doesn't deserve a poetic ending in my story. He gets what he gets. A mention in legal documents, a restraining order, a bunch of blocked social media accounts, and an ex-wife who refuses to let him define her anymore. My ending. Though my ending is still being written. Every day I wake up in my apartment, make my own choices, live my own life. I'm writing it. It's not a fairy tale. There's no prince coming to save me because I've learned I never needed saving. I needed to save myself, and I did. The Coke stain probably came out of his shirt eventually. The stain he left on my life took longer to fade, but it's fading. Every therapy session, every laugh with friends, every day I don't think about him, it fades a little more. This is my happy ending. I'm alone in my apartment, writing this story on my laptop, sitting on my couch, living my life. It's not the ending I imagined when I got married 5 years ago, full of hope and promises of forever. But it's the ending I fought for. The ending I earned, the ending I chose. And that makes it perfect.